Thursday early office hours and ask me anything. I'm going to try to do this most Thursdays. It's noon where I am currently, which is Europe, on December 12th, 2019. And just want to load up all the windows here and see if anybody wants to ask any questions. But this is a live office hours and ask me anything. I'm going to try to do twice a day on most Thursdays. Of course, it's free, so I'm taking absolutely any questions you could possibly have. Feel free to ask absolutely anything. There's really no limits here. And until we get some people watching and asking questions, and let's see, I'm going to try to see if I can open the YouTube up as well. Have been having trouble with that. So hopefully people are asking questions mostly in LinkedIn, but I'll try to get the YouTube running. So while I try to get some of this running, I wanted to talk a little bit about a few things I saw on LinkedIn today, and then I'm going to shift into a discussion, a general discussion about portfolios. Plus, I'll be taking whatever questions you want to ask, so feel free to ask those questions. So let's see. YouTube doesn't seem to think I'm streaming right now, which is lots of fun. All right. So let's start with a couple of things I saw on LinkedIn today. One of them was that if some of you saw the post that I put up where I was saying, we see so many photos of people in rooms with post-its and at tables with post-its, and it's always, the customer journey and, oh, we're doing this. And we never see what came before that, if anything came before that. We never seem to see how any CX or UX research was done. And it just looks like in order to do good UX research, all you have to do is get a bunch of people in a room and put down lots of post-its. And in reality, what's happening very often is there is no process there. It's just people in a room guessing at the customer journey, yes, making assumptions about personas. And I want to challenge you guys. Even if sitting in a room with sticky notes is part of your process, I still want to see people showing the fuller process. We spoke to customers, we observed customers. Show us a picture of that, even if you have to blur out some faces or things like that. I want to see more of that process. So we're not just showing people in a room with post-its. And I posted something general like that in response to someone who had posted another picture of people in a room with post-its. And I was just writing generally, like, I just want to see more pictures of people doing a fuller process and not this isolated moment. And this person accused me of white splaining, which I actually had to stop and think about as I hadn't seen that one yet. And I was rather surprised by that because that is basically telling me I have an opinion or a thought on making sure we're showcasing thorough and correct CX and UX research because I'm white and the person posting isn't. I would say before you want to jump to Deb is racist, why don't you just make sure that's what you really think? Because if those of you who see me commenting on other people's posts, hopefully by now have figured out that this is not about anybody's skin color, ethnicity, location, religion, political leaning, uh, or anything else, any possible anything else. If I am writing on someone's post and agree with them or disagree with them or have another idea or a random side tangential suggestion, hey, we should make sure we're also showing this. That's not about skin color. That's not about where you are, at least not for me. I'm not white splaining CX research. CX research is a formalized thing with suggested tasks and processes and suggested expertise. And I believe that we should be showing that to everybody so that they don't just think we draw boxes on a page and so that they don't just think that we sit in a room with post-its and that's how we come up with customer journey maps. So whether you think I'm racist or not, which is sad and unfortunate, but whether or not you think I'm racist, I'm still going to suggest that we show more pictures around LinkedIn in our companies of that fuller research process so that we're not giving people the impression that a good customer journey map is made from just people sitting in a room with Post-its, guessing, assuming, whatever the case may be. Again, this is a office hours and ask me anything. So I'm just going to kind of talk on some ideas until people ask questions, but feel free to interrupt me with any questions you have about anything in my world, the CX world, the UX world. This is your time to get my opinion or my thoughts on whatever is on your mind. And I'm just filling some time until I see some questions. Another thing before I talk about portfolios, another thing I saw on LinkedIn today was a guy had posted that that companies should never be customer centric. Now, of course, when that's your headline, you run the risk that people read the headline and go, okay, there's an author, a thought leader, a somebody who says we shouldn't be customer centric. And if that's going to be your headline or your leading line, remember that you run the risk that nobody reads past that and nobody sees whatever your argument was. And we know there's a lot of conference sessions out there that's like, UX is dead or UCD is broken. And then they go on to tell you why it's not. But if you just keep seeing these headlines, remember that every headline and starting line teaches people we work with and don't work with a little bit more about us. So every time a manager, leader, executive sees another article, LinkedIn post, conference session, whatever that says nobody should be customer centric, remember you run the risk that they get the impression over time and over people we shouldn't be customer centric. That's the wrong direction for us to go. We should just go back to our original ideas of what the business wants to build. Now, the point of this person's post was that we should balance what the business wants and what the customer wants. But my thought was, that's not clear. And I haven't even had the chance to see what would it even look like for companies to be truly customer centric. Well, before we poop on that and before we decide we shouldn't do that, what does that even look like? What would it look like for companies to have thoroughly researched with customers like me or not like me and truly architected and designed and tested for all of us out there, the users, the customers? What would that even look like before we say we shouldn't do this and before we say it's out of balance? Let's try it. Let's try being customer centric. And then we could say, oh no, we were too customer centric. What would that even look like? I'm not saying that customer centricity means we make bad decisions or we design for one person or we don't take some business goals into account. But why are business goals so far from customer needs? These have to come together, and they mostly have to come together by the business goals realizing they were going the wrong direction. So again, be careful when you are posting stuff and you have a bit of a what's the word I'm looking for? Like inflammatory or maybe clickbaity headline or first line. You run the risk that that's all people see, and people go, "Oh, that famous author says we shouldn't be customer centric at all." Okay, I'm seeing that often enough. We shouldn't do it. So we've got some questions, and I'm going to start taking those. We'll be talking about portfolios today, but also taking any questions that you have for our time together. And Shreya asks, can you please tell us what are your thoughts on an approach to growing as a UX designer? Always a great question. My advice there is that you need a few things in place to probably help you with growth. Now, again, by saying growing, I assume that you already know something about UX or might be working in UX, because otherwise the question might be, how do I start as a UX designer? So since you're saying growing, I'm assuming you have some foundation education and maybe you've had your first job or second or whatever. So how do you grow? Certainly you can get a mentor, someone who can work with you on where you're trying to grow to. Are you trying to grow to more breadth of expertise in the UX world? Are you trying to grow into leadership? Are you trying to grow into public speaking? There's so many ways that you can grow too. So I would say if you have a mentor, they can be kind of your personal coach to help you think about what your goals are and make sure you've established some goals and what you can do to work towards them. Sometimes there are good books to read. Sometimes there are good courses to take. Sometimes there are good conferences to attend. But growth is a pretty general word. So I would say it's probably different for different people based on what your goals are, because everybody's going to have some different goals. But obviously, mentors are great where you can get them free or paid. I recognize people love free mentors, but not everyone can do it for free. There's certainly looking for opportunity. If you have a job now, looking for opportunities to move up with that. So looking for, if you are a mid-level or senior UX designer and you've already been doing this a number of years, poke around a little bit and see where there might be opportunities within your company to start mentoring people significantly more junior. You have 5 years, they're in their first job. Can you give them some mentoring, some work reviews? Look for opportunities maybe at your workplace to do lunch and learn, where people get together and eat lunch and you're going to present a topic to them. Like, I love to tell people about Gestalt principles of perception. That's a presentation you could do within your UX department if people aren't familiar with that. It's a presentation you could do to other departments, though they may not care as much. So you have to think about who's your audience. If it's going to be the cross-functional team, I usually teach some other things, but lunch and learn is great. And again, will that help you grow? Well, it would certainly help you start to be seen a little bit with a little bit more leadership. So that could be an area you're looking to grow in. So Shreya, let me know if what kind of growth you might be thinking about, so I can answer the question more specifically. And you've also asked, how do you deal with non-disclosures, NDAs, when you want to show stuff on your portfolio? There's really only two ways to do that, three ways, in my opinion. One is you don't show it at all because you're too worried about what people might think of it. The second would be that you don't put it on your public portfolio. So it's not in a PDF, it's not on a website, and you just let workplaces or recruiters or other people know. I do have other portfolio pieces I can show, but only in very limited ways in a very limited scenario. So there are some things that I showed in private meetings and interviews, when I knew people weren't going to take control of the stuff, say, here's my computer, I'm showing you this, here are some things that were done. But before that, I do number three, which is scrub, 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 and take the stuff that you've done and take out anything that identifies what company this is or what project it is. Now, if it's really something super top secret, a new technology or something that hasn't gone live yet, you can't show that. So my advice here is not going to be for the stuff that is wildly top secret that you really shouldn't show to anybody. In that case, you are just stuck trying to speak to it, maybe tell a story about it, but without saying too much about what it is or what it does. But where these things are a little just more private, or this project did go live, but not quite in the way you had designed it, it got changed along the way, or something else where it's certainly private, but not crazy top secret. What I do is I scrub it. So I take off all the logos, I take off phone numbers, I take off email addresses, I take off any reference to the company name, any company slogan, anything that would tell you what company this is. So there's one that I show, for example, and it's an actual prototype I made for a bank. And the bank was testing a potential website for what was going to be a spin-off bank for them, kind of an all online bank, because that was the big thing, and in some ways still is. And they wanted a really realistic website to show. And so I did some really great actual prototyping that I like to show in my portfolio. But this bank site, I don't think ever went live. So I can't tell you who the bank was. I can't tell you what this concept was. But because the website just looks like a bank website and there's nothing really there that's groundbreaking, other than it would have been all online with no branches, because it just looks like a bank site, I just present it as, this is just a private confidential banking website that I prototyped, and now you can take a look at my prototype. And of course, I've taken off anything that would make them identify who this was at all. And so I have some success with something like that. So see what you can scrub, but also make the call on anything that shouldn't be shown. I worked on some stuff at Macy's that was highly confidential, that would look really great on my portfolio, and I can't tell you about it. And I've just taken the approach of, I can't tell you about this. I can say that it was conversational in nature. It was speaking to a thing. But other than that, I can't show you any of my designs or how any of it went, because I feel that's too confidential. And even if I tried to take off what company that was, and I've just told you what company it was, I wouldn't be successful. It would still be too private a project. So I don't show everything. Imran asks, can UX be managed by product management? So I find that certainly the pinnacle of UX maturity is that we have our own place in the organization, that up from UX are managers, directors, VPs, so on and so forth, until you get to that chief experience officer. And that means organizationally, we're not answering to other departments. We have our own branch of the organization. So we don't answer to product, we don't answer to engineering, we don't answer to marketing. That's always the optimum way to go in an organization. If we cannot answer to ourselves all the way up the chain, I have found that the best organizational branch for us is product. Now, that doesn't mean we're managed by product managers. So let me explain my take on that. For example, at Macy's, we had a UX department, which had a VP, directors, managers, and lots of worker bees. There are about 40 or 45 people in the department when I worked there, and I quit there almost 2 years ago. So that's how old that information is. Then we had a product management team. It was product managers and their managers and that VP and so on. And just north of our VPs, we answered to the same person, and that was kind of a larger head of product. I don't remember that person's title. I do know that person is gone, but there was kind of a larger head of product. But notice that that was many levels before we kind of joined the same branch. And I think that's a good way to go. I think when UX answers directly to product managers, who technically would be our teammates and at our same level, you've already got an imbalance of power, and that product manager is probably going to treat us as an order taker. Not always, but often. So I don't want to answer to the product manager on my team. We should be lateral buddies. Now, could I answer to the product manager's boss? In a smaller company or company that's still figuring out UX with lower maturity, that does happen, and it can work if the product organization is truly devoted to focusing on customer needs and customer value. I have found when product organizations are really focused on the business, where it's all about business needs, business requirements, business this, and the customer's a little bit of an afterthought, or yeah, we'll test this on them after it's released, then I find that's still a mismatch. Now, that might be a mismatch job period, because who wants to work at that company? But I would say in general, UX can be managed by product, but more generally, if you are answering to the product manager you're supposed to work with, I would find that to be probably a power struggle and power imbalance. This is a office hours, ask me anything. So I'm just taking general questions on absolutely anything you want to ask about CX, UX, career paths. We're live on YouTube and on LinkedIn. I've got about 12 people watching right now. Thank you for joining. I'll be doing this again much later in the day to catch more of the North American time zone. So it's noon where I am. I think it's what, quarter to 5 p.m. in India, guys. So this one's really for you. It's an hour earlier than where I am in the UK, but most of North America is still sleeping. So I'll be doing this again in some hours, hoping to catch North American people with their questions. And I'll try to do this every Thursday that isn't a holiday or where I'm traveling. So again, open to questions. While I'm waiting for questions, I want to speak a little bit generally about portfolios. Now, you guys know, or some of you on LinkedIn know, that I offered to look at people's portfolios for free, just to shoot like a 10-minute video and tell you what I thought of your portfolio, pretending that I'm a hiring manager with a busy day with 50 resumes on my desk. And I'm just going to quickly look at your portfolio and try to figure out one thing. Do I want to interview you or not? Am I seeing enough talent, process, approach in UX or CX that tells me I want to meet this person? I want to check them out a little bit more, want to get to know them, versus no, I don't want to meet them. Now, I've had about 30 people sign up for this portfolio review, and I'll be doing most of them Friday and into the weekend. But I have already noticed, and of course, I looked at 7 portfolios today, and I looked at one yesterday, and I looked at a bunch. I look at these all the time. So anyone who says, oh, Deb is just judging this on a few portfolios she saw today. No, this is let's imagine this is every portfolio I've seen this year, just to keep it current. I am generally seeing a few types of portfolios. Number one, absolutely fantastic people, and you know who you are, since I'm letting you know. There are some absolutely fantastic people out there who've put together wonderful portfolios that made me absolutely want to interview them, if not work with them, where they told a great story. They really showed their UX process. I understood their approach. They showed me where they made an assumption, but went to validate or invalidate that with research or testing. And so it was a really beautiful, complete process and approach, and gave me an idea of their abilities in different areas within CX and UX. There are portfolios where people probably have some good talent, maybe a little bit newer to UX, but I could see that there was talent, but the portfolio was a little bit of a mess. The portfolio did not do a good job telling their story. I had to guess whether or not they were doing research. Did they do it correctly? Because they'll say general things like, we interviewed users. How many? Who are they? Were they your trade school teammates? Were they real customers? Were they people who work for the client or this fake company or real company? I want to know more because I'm really trying to get to know your process and approach. So if you just say, we interviewed users, or I saw a lot of, no, that's really the third type of portfolio. So the second type of portfolio is you've got some good talent, but the portfolio didn't tell the story as well as it could have. So give me more about what you did and in what order you did it, and clean up that portfolio a little bit so it really tells your story. I would say the third type of portfolio I'm seeing is someone who really doesn't do UX work yet. I've seen a couple of web designers, what I would call web designers, who are people who go to a client and say, what do you want on your website? Okay, I can make that website. And they say they care about users, but they don't show any process that includes users at all. And so for these third types of portfolios, the problem isn't that the portfolio didn't tell a story well enough. The story I got was, you kind of don't do UX, and that's okay. But if you believe this is a UX portfolio, then there's a real mismatch there. And typically, this mismatch is not the storytelling of the portfolio as it was in the second group, but more like, you haven't had enough education, you haven't had enough practice. I see a lot of portfolios from people who did self-study or trade schools, and I can tell that they really don't know very much, especially about mobile app design, because they'll say, here's a mobile app that we made, and almost always it's got mistakes, like mistakes you wouldn't even see in any of the apps that are on your phone. If you opened your phone, that you wouldn't see a hamburger menu here with a back button here with another thing here that just doesn't make sense on mobile. It's like all mismatched. So for those people, typically the problem isn't better storytelling in your portfolio. It's that you're really not ready for a UX job yet. Yes, I am saying these things to people in the portfolio reviews. I don't enjoy saying it, but I'd rather tell you that than have you thinking, I'm great at UX, or hey, I took this trade school, I'm ready for a job. Why am I not getting interviews? I wouldn't interview you either because I'm not sure you have a good knowledge of UX process. And so just remember that when you're sending me your portfolios, and those of you who sent it, I'm looking tomorrow and into the weekend, so you have time to brush them up if you'd like to. Consider your storytelling. Does this tell a knowledgeable expert UX manager, pretend that's me, a real story about what I can do and what I bring to a UX project? Because when I see these things that say, we interviewed users, that's not enough. And magically, I never see testing. Isn't anybody doing testing? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. So ouch, 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 portfolios. We've got some questions coming in, so I'm going to shift to those. And our good friend says, would you prefer full stack engineers or front end engineers to work with UX? I like to collaborate with everybody in engineering because there's different reasons to collaborate with different people. So we're collaborating with front end more for the UI side, which is usually not my thing. You guys know I'm not an artist. So typically that's the visual designer on the project is probably collaborating most closely with the front end developer. But I've been on plenty of projects where even though I wasn't the artist, I was collaborating closely with the front end devs. I might also be collaborating with back-end programmers or with DevOps engineers or security people. There's always lots of people on that tech side, just that broad tech side, who we could be speaking with to learn about technologies, to learn about limitations, to learn about the scope of the project, to learn about, hey, I'm starting to go in this direction with this idea, post it. Can you guys build this? And when I say guys, I mean that gender neutrally. Can you everybody build, can you build this? Am I going in the right direction, or am I going to build something where later on you're going to say to me, We don't have the API calls. We don't have the services or microservices. We don't have this in place. We can't do this. So that's why we have to work with lots of people in engineering. I would say time and time again. By the way, there looks like there's about a full minute or more of delay. So if you're asking me a question and I seem to not get to it quickly, I'm seeing a long delay on LinkedIn. And so apologies there, but do ask your question. I will get to it. So engineers, I want to work with everybody. Who do I prefer to work with? Everybody. I don't have a preference. I want to talk to everybody in engineering so that I can make sure that we are collaborating well, that as I'm doing work, they're seeing it, not to give their approval, but to make sure that I'm not building something that will surprise them later that they can't construct. Sumit says, does a design system play an important role in product development? I believe it does. In the old days, we had design systems. We just called them different things. I used to call them a component library. There would be people calling it a style guide. And obviously design system is the newer, bigger, better version of these things, but they all are about reusable visual components. Now, just because we have a library of reusable visual components doesn't mean we don't need a great CX UX designer to come up with screens and flows and pages. We can't just take these pieces and throw them in and go, yep, great UX. It might not be. So we have to make sure that we're using those design systems correctly and that we're using them more for the visual layer. I forgot what Jesse James Garrett calls it. Somebody help me. That visual layer, rather than, oh, this is just drag and drop functionality. I've had some people say that to me, like, we want a design system so we don't need a UX person, so we can just drag out these pieces and make our own page. Just because you dragged out predefined or good looking pieces doesn't mean you've made a great customer experience. So I do love design systems, but I do worry sometimes that they can be misused or misinterpreted if people don't understand what they're really there for. And they're really great to connect the visual designers and UI with our good buddies doing front end development, so that we have those reusable pieces, hopefully in code snippet blocks as well. Carrie, our good friend, I believe from Oslo, was it? I experience constantly as an IT recruiter the challenge of candidates not expressing the tacit knowledge of the candidate most likely to have. Hope to have you back in Norway. You are from Oslo. I remember you. I've been to Norway 3 times this year, Carrie. I'm sorry we didn't get to connect more, and I hope everything's going well for you in your recruiting. Yes, if you are keeping your knowledge tacit or quiet and secretive, then we have a problem that the candidate isn't doing their best job to express what they're capable of. Let me make sure I'm understanding Carrie's question, and feel free to write more about it and embellish on this if I'm missing something you're asking. We need to make sure that us as candidates are helping recruiters know our strengths and our weaknesses. Whenever I talk to a recruiter, I say, look, there's a mountain of stuff that I can do. And you can sell me to the end of the earth with all of this, nearly full spectrum user-centered design, but I don't do visual design. I can work with a design system, but don't ask me to make the design system. I just don't have good natural art chops, so I stay away from it. And hey, I'm remote. I can appear on site here and there, but don't expect me to come to an office. You've got to sell me outside of that. But again, when it comes to the knowledge that people have, it's really important to make sure our portfolios are telling these stories. And that's going to help Carrie and other recruiters as well. We have to make sure our portfolios are telling the stories of our process and what we're able to do. But Carrie, please feel free to add to that question so I can make sure I know what you're talking about. We've got Marie, and again, I'm bad at pronouncing people's names. Is it really relevant, according to you, to differentiate CX and UX when it is all about human total experience, knowing that user experience encompasses all aspects of the end user's interactions with the company, services, and products by Don Norman, and that we should master the same knowledges? Okay, so I hear what Maria is asking, and here's what I would say to that. We know that Don Norman originally intended for user experience to encompass the full spectrum of everything a customer could think, feel, do, experience, touch, interact with, whatever, the entire company. So not just, ooh, it's on a screen, ooh, this is what I'm doing. Now, over time, I mean, because he came up with that definition in what, the early 90s, over time the definition has morphed. And we've seen other definitions morphed. I hear design thinking was actually meaningful about 10 years ago. So we've seen definitions morph. Now people think of user experience as what happens on a screen and a digital interface, but they think of CX, customer experience, as that full arc of all of the experiences that customers are having with our company, with our brand, with our products and services. So, because of that, do I differentiate them? I differentiate them less and less. I still say CX and UX so that nobody out. And because some people think CX is just your department of customer support reps that clean up messes. But I am shifting my language to CX. And that is why my book is called Delta CX. So it's really about the business transformation we need to make when we care about quality and the full customer experience. So I am shifting my language towards CX because it's what Don Norman meant, though it's not what Don Norman said. He said UX, but now people think that just means design a screen. And UX is so misunderstood, and we have such branding problems and such problems at companies who don't understand what we do and how we do it and think we're just order takers. Just tell me to put a checkbox over there. That I feel like we need to break away from the UX label just to try to give ourselves a little bit of a fresh start and go for what Don Norman intended. But I think it would be harder to redefine UX as that total human experience. And that's why I've been shifting more to CX, because many people already see it as the total human experience. I hope that helps, Marie, and I'm curious on what you think. Syed, hello, says, how do you do user testing and a user interview if we're working remotely and we can't interact in person? For example, we're working from India, but we work for someone in another country. Great question. So there are some types of user research I find you can do remotely and testing, and there are some that you just have to be there, and that's going to mean people getting on airplanes, possibly. But of course, I always hope that people can budget for that. So when it comes to user testing, if you're doing unmoderated user testing, like I use Userlytics, people might use user testing, or God, there's an endless mountain of those out there. With that type of testing, then of course I've got a prototype, I've got my tasks, and I just let people loose and I watch their videos. With more passive things like Hotjar, and I think Full Story is the other one, though I haven't tried that one yet. Um, you are more passively kind of watching what people are doing on websites and learning a lot from that. I always learn from those recordings, even though I haven't specifically run a test with someone. When you're doing moderated testing, certainly there's moderated testing that we can do like this over Zoom, where someone is at their location and they're using something and we're recording them and maybe we're seeing their screen. And so we've got the face camera and we've got the screen and we hear what they're doing. That can usually work even if you are moderating it. But I think where remote research and testing fall apart is when we really need to, like, say, user research observational studies. I need to watch someone in their environment using our thing, a competitor's thing, no thing, whatever it is. I've got to be there. I just have to be there. Setting up a camera and trying to see what they're doing, it's not the same. As much as possible when I'm doing remote stuff, because I also work remotely, I'm American, but I'm based in Europe. So when I'm working remotely, when I'm working with users on user interviews and certain types of research, as well as certain types of testing, I'm trying to use right now Zoom, and I try to get faces involved. They can see my face, I can see their face. It's more human. I can watch for facial expressions, which means I'm not looking at the camera as much. I'm looking at my screen. So I think you can do this, Syed, but I think you're going to be limited to what types of things you can do well remotely, because there are some things that just have to be done on site. And normally, when people are an outside agency, as you might be, I would put that into the budget. You know, if you know ahead of time that we're going to do this type of testing, and for some of this, we just need to be with you customers, this is what's going to cost for our two best people to fly to you. Okay. Doesn't feel cheap, does it? But in the bigger scheme of things, if that's the way you need to do testing, that's the way you need to do it. And either you need partners in these other countries who will pick that up as kind of freelancers or something, or you've got to fly there. So I would say also consider a bit of a freelancer network where if you had to do testing, say in Europe, you send me. I'm really close. You're doing testing in America. I'm not there right now, but you find some people who are, and you see if they can do it. So I would say try some of that. Try growing into some partnerships and growing your network and see if that'll help. Any other questions? This is an ask me anything office hours kind of thing. We are delayed about a minute or so between when I'm speaking and when you guys are hearing it. So I know that there's going to be some delay in the questions and the answers and the comments, but keep them coming. We've got 32 people watching right now. Thanks to everybody joining. We're about a half hour in. I try not to go longer than an hour. I would love to not go longer than a half hour, but I often find people just have so many questions. And I'll also be doing this again in about 6.5 hours to try to catch more North American, other side of the world time zones. And I will try to do this every Thursday. So mark your calendars. Next week, Thursday for sure. Week after that is the day after Christmas. I still plan to do it. And I think the week after that is either New Year's Day or January 2nd. I plan to do it. So basically, if I'm not traveling or it's not a huge international holiday, I plan to do this Thursdays and hopefully twice a day. So if there's no other questions, I'll start winding down for this session. I'll give you guys another minute or so just to see if you have any questions. Even if you just want to type me, and then I know you're typing something longer and I'll wait. But without, because it doesn't show me like people are typing, I don't get like ... That would help. UX, come on, CX. I want to know that some of you are typing so I know not to end this, but I don't know that because it doesn't show me if anybody's typing. So, LinkedIn Live, tip for you. There haven't been any questions on YouTube, so I'm just going to focus on LinkedIn. And again, I'll wrap this up in about a minute if I don't see anybody else asking a question. This is office hours, so all things are open. You can even bring me work you're working on. You could bring me your portfolio if you don't mind everybody seeing this. This is public, so maybe don't necessarily show public work, but maybe a fake project you're working on for your portfolio could do that. Julio, always nice. You always say that to me. You always say that. Happy days to you as well. I guess we would say buongiorno in Italian. But Julio, good to see you there. And let's see, I invite you to innovate your projects with ... Ooh, sounds interesting. Any other questions? Otherwise, again, I'll wrap up and have my lunch. I had a little bit of lunch before I started, but I cooked it, and honestly, it wasn't very good. So I'm not in a big rush to go back to lunch. Hello, someone says, how to make user confident about ourselves. I'm not sure what you mean there. How to make a user confident about ourselves? Can you explain that one a little bit while I answer Majid's question? How to make user confident about ourselves. What is more important in the portfolio? Thank you, Majid. I would say what I think is most important is I mean, this is a broad answer, but it's storytelling. I want to see that you have enough UX chops to understand and predict what I need to determine if I should interview you. Now you're following that up and you're saying visual or UX research. I am typically not assessing people's visual design abilities, but those of you who have received Ajay, I don't know. I still don't understand your question. How to make user confident about ourselves? I'm trying to make other people confident about me, or I'm trying to make me confident about me? I don't understand your question. So back to Majid. Visual or UX. I'm usually not judging people's visual design abilities because I'm usually looking at more UX stuff and not the visual design or UI side. That being said, if I see a portfolio that says, and I did the visual design, I will eyeball it because I have done some art direction and some creative direction, even though I'm not an artist. I know a few things. I'm not going to tell people how to do a technique or something. That's their world. But I can look at something and say, your buttons are inconsistent. You didn't have a design system, or you didn't have a plan. Your fonts are strange. Your colors are not friendly to the color blind. There's certainly some things that I can see in visual. But if I'm looking at a UX portfolio for someone who's looking for a UX job, then I expect to see UX focused stuff like research, architecture, design, testing, what you learned from that, what you had to pivot because you had an incorrect assumption. That's what I'm looking for. If you want to work for a UX expert, that's the story your portfolio has to tell. If you're hoping to get some freelance work, or you're hoping to work for a non-UX expert, and you know that pretty much anything goes, then very often you're going to showcase your visual design work because people love to see pretty things. But if you really want to work for someone or a place that takes UX seriously, then you need to have a serious UX portfolio. Um, how to make user confident about ourselves. I still don't understand your question. How to make me confident about myself? I would say hold that question. We're going to be doing a live stream podcast with Dr. Seth Finkel, who is a psychologist. He's going to be talking about imposter syndrome and probably talking about confidence as well. We don't have that scheduled yet, but that's going to be coming. So I would say look for that. How to make users comfortable with what? I don't understand your question. Should a delete button be red? Hard for me to answer because I don't see what else is around it. If everything is on the page is red and the delete button is red, then it looks the same as everything else. Many people do put delete buttons in red, but of course we want to make sure that the button still has words or icons on it because colorblind people might not parse the redness of it. Again, so what should a delete button look like, or what color should it be? These are more visual design questions. They can end up hurting the UX, but these are more visual design questions, and also these are going to be questions that are going to be different for different projects. I can't say the delete button should always be red. I think I've done delete buttons in other colors, but yeah, a lot of people do use red. But again, you have to make sure it's uh, got words or other things so that it stands out to the colorblind. Thanks a lot. You're welcome a lot. So I think that's going to be it for now, because how do we make users comfortable, or how do we give people confidence, or how do we make users comfortable? I'm not totally sure what that means. So let's wrap up for now, and let's try to come back to that question in a future episode when I can get a little bit more information around like a specific scenario or example. And then I can try to speak to that scenario or example. So in that sense, I'm going to wrap up the stream for now. This is 42 minutes long. It will be archived on YouTube if you want to check our channel. So look for the Delta CX channel on YouTube. Please subscribe there. Also, take a look at deltacx.com. That's my website. You can check out more about the book, and you can also learn about our upcoming conference called Concentric, which will be one day, January 24th, and completely online. So you can join from everywhere in the world. With some apologies to time zones. It's only about $90 to come to the conference, so it's really low priced, and it's going to be a full day of great live talks. So thanks to everybody who joined. Oh, Carrie says, would you have any examples of good storytelling flows, architecture, or portfolio? Carrie, I'm going to run, but before I show other people's portfolios, let me get their permission to see if I can share them, and then I will private message you with some that I liked, if I can send that to you, or we can do it in another thing. But first, let me make sure people are okay with me showing their stuff publicly and speaking to it. So let me ping a few people on that who had really nice portfolios, and we'll circle back on that one. So for now, I'm going to go, but thanks to everybody for joining me live. I'll be live again later today. Everybody have a great day, great night, great morning, wherever you are, and I will catch everybody later. Now I'm looking